So somehow
I
it
agree
works.
with you.
That works
Yes.
that way, but not the other way, I think.
Yeah, Yılmaz, welcome to Mentor Hub. Thank you so much for agreeing.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, just to let you know, guys, Yılmaz, I talked to Yılmaz for the first time, right? We exchanged emails, right? So if you guys remember, Senyang presented last time. So I think Yılmaz, you and Senyang studied together or something like that, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Senyang spoke highly of you. Yeah, Senyang spoke highly of you, and she thought that we would benefit a lot from your talk. So thank you so much. Hoş geldiniz.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hoş bulduk.
So hello, everyone. We'll start now. So yeah, we have Dr. Yılmaz Köylü today with us. And yeah, thank you for accepting our invitation to talk to us today. So Dr. Yılmaz is a lecturer at the English department at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, USA. And he's going to talk to us about writing. I think it is one of the most difficult skills to both teach and acquire and develop, right? So today's webinar is about purpose, context, and audience in writing instruction. Without further ado, the floor is to Dr. Yılmaz.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to mute you all.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to mute everybody. So hi, everyone. My name is Yılmaz Köylü. Today, I'm going to talk to you about writing, basically task-based language teaching and writing. First of all, I want to apologize because my internet connection is very, very unstable because I'm currently traveling and I am in a hotel room right now. So if something goes wrong and if the connection is lost, I'll try my best to reconnect again as soon as possible. But I think Nodira has the PowerPoint presentation. So you can look at the PowerPoint presentation. I can show you the PowerPoint presentation. So if something is unclear and if the connection is lost, please ask me when I'm here and then I'll do my best to clarify things. So now we can start. So today I'm going to talk to you. I need to see myself. I'll just put this somewhere. Okay. Today I'm going to talk to you about writing, and the title of my presentation is Purpose, Context, and Audience in Writing Instruction. So let's start. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the evolution of second language teaching method. Nodira, I'm going to ask you, can you not make me the host so I don't see these things here? So you can admit the new people.
But you will not be then able to share your screen.
Oh, there. Okay. It's fine. It's fine. Okay.
Okay.
So
yeah, sorry.
It's okay. So today's agenda, here is the agenda. First, we are going to talk about the evolution of second language teaching methodology. And then we are going to talk about task-based language teaching. Following that, I'm going to talk about writing instruction through the lens of task-based language teaching. And then I'm going to talk about the importance of purpose, context, and audience in writing instruction. And then I'm going to show you a task-based writing activity. We'll follow and we'll conclude the presentation with questions and answers. If you have any questions during my presentation, please write them down and you can ask me at the end of the presentation. So let's quickly talk about the evolution of second language teaching methodology. I want this part to be very quick. because these are things you probably have heard of, maybe you read a lot about. So I'm not going to talk too much about them, but I'll just kind of skim those things a little bit. So first of all, we have the grammar translation method. This was popular between 1840s and 1940s, and basically in Europe. So the grammar translation method assumes that language acquisition takes place as L2 learners develop the ability to read a text in another language and to translate the text from one language into another language. So the main goal is to improve L2 learners' ability to read literature. So the emphasis in the grammar translation method was on writing and reading. But then came the direct method. This was developed in the 1930s by a person named Maximilian Berlitz. And it originated as a response to the grammar translation method. Why? Because in the grammar translation method, the emphasis was on writing and reading, but the emphasis in the direct method was on listening and communication. And the teacher, compared to the grammar translation method, had a more active role in the direct method. Then came the audiolingual method. So the audiolingual method has its roots in behaviorism, according to which learners' experiences determine whether they can acquire a second language or not. Therefore, the audiolingual method emphasizes the use of mechanical and pattern drills practice. So the instructor takes the role of a leader, and the learners imitate the language they hear from the instructor. So how this happens is, for example, let's say I'm teaching the present simple tense. I say, I go to school, and then I give you another pronoun, you. And then you say, you as the learner, you say, you go to school. And I say he, and then you change it to he goes to school. So of course, I don't think anybody teaches like this anymore, but this was really popular in the 1950s and 1960s. Then came the total physical response. This was developed by James Asher in the 1970s. So the total physical response assumes that understanding language input plays a key role in language acquisition. Instructors use commands to direct behavior and to teach new material, vocabulary, or grammatical structures. So in total physical response, commands played a very key role. For example, let's say we are teaching some vocabulary about body parts. In a total physical response class, what the instructor did was giving commands to learners like touch your nose, touch your eyes, things like that, right? To teach language. Of course, nobody uses that anymore, I think. Then came the natural approach. This was developed in the 1970s and 1980s by Tracy Terrell and Stephen Krashen. The natural approach argues that second language learners should be exposed to comprehensible inputs, and lessons should be structured around themes or topics rather than grammatical structures. So things should be based on meaning, but not like, oh, this week we are teaching the learners present perfect tense. This week we are teaching the learners past perfect tense. It should not be based on that, but lessons should be built around themes, and we should give students a lot of inputs in the language. Then came the communicative language teaching approach. This is still being used today. This started in the 1980s, but it's still in use today. This approach encourages the development of communicative competence. So what do we mean by communicative competence? We mean grammatical competence, pragmatic competence, and sociolinguistic competence. So in this approach, the main function of language is communication. So there is not that much emphasis on language structures, but the language is just there for us to be able to communicate using the language. And then there is content and language integrated learning. This is also something that is being used today. I'm sure there are schools around the world that teaches certain subjects through the medium of English, right? So this approach focuses on the teaching of various subjects let's say history, mathematics, philosophy, through the use of the second language. So think of a school where they are teaching all those subjects in English, right? So the focus is not just on content, but also on the integrated learning of the content and the language together. And finally, I want to talk about task-based language teaching. I'm going to emphasize this a lot because the rest of the presentation is going to be through the lens of task-based language teaching. So this was developed in the 2000 by someone named, by a really amazing researcher named Michael Long. Task-based language teaching differs from traditional approaches by emphasizing the importance of engaging learners' natural abilities for acquiring language incidentally through the performance of tasks that draw learners' attention to meaning. So what is happening in task-based language teaching is learners are completing some tasks. And while they're completing some tasks, they're naturally, incidentally acquiring language, right? So the focus is not on some grammar or structure. The focus is completing some tasks. So let's look at task-based language teaching a little more in detail. First of all, we need to define what is a task. What do we mean by a task? According to Long 1985, a task means the 101 things people do in everyday life, at work, at play, and in between. So tasks are the things that people will tell you they do if you ask them, and they're not applied linguists. So in language pedagogy, task is the unit of analysis throughout the course of design, implementation, and evaluation intended to meet the communicative needs of diverse group of learners. So task is anything that we do in our lives. So how can we use those to teach the language? Let's see. Again, what is a task? Tasks involve the expression and interpretation of meaning, and they have a purpose, and the purpose is not language practice. It is not. A task requires learners to comprehend, manipulate, and produce target forms while they are performing some tasks. So as you can see, the focus is on completion of a task rather than the language itself, right? So what are some key features of tasks? First of all, we have to have inputs. What is input? Input is the written, visual, or oral information that learners performing a task work on to achieve the goal of the task. We have roles in tasks. What are the roles? Roles are the things that learners have in performing a task, such as whether they are information givers, whether they are information receivers. What roles do students have in the completion of a task? What about the setting? Settings are the different groupings that students have in and outside the classroom. What about actions? Actions are the specific procedures, specific steps that students need to follow in completing a task. What about monitoring? Tasks should also have a feature of monitoring. This is the supervisory process of ensuring that the task performance remains on track. So the teacher has to make sure that the students are progressing in a task. They are completing a task. They are doing something to complete a task. We also need to have an outcome in a task. These are the oral, written, or behavioral outcomes in which the task is intended to result. And finally, we have feedback. Once there is a completion of a task, the teacher needs to make sure that they provide some feedback on the task, on the product that is completed, right? So why is it advantageous to use task-based language teaching? Because tasks provide a context for negotiating and comprehending meaning. We not only negotiate meaning, we communicate with someone, we are negotiating meaning, we are trying to understand something in the second language or foreign language while completing a task. Tasks provide opportunities for uptake of implicit and explicit corrective feedback on a participant's production. Tasks provide opportunities for incorporation of positive evidence. So students hear something good about the language, they hear some good structure, or let's say a certain form that they can use, and then this is good input for them so that they can later use those forms or structures. Tasks provide opportunities for noticing the gap between a participant's production and the input. Let's say a student always makes a certain mistake, but then while
Yılmaz, could you please unmute yourself? Sorry.
Okay. Now you can hear me, right? Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So tasks provide opportunities for noticing the gap between a participant's production and inputs. What does that mean? Let's say a learner always makes a mistake when they use a certain grammatical structure. While working on a task, they can realize that the actual grammar differs from their own grammar, and they can correct that. What else is task-based language teaching good for? Task demands can focus attention on specific structures or concepts and prompt effort to grammaticize them, which may improve accuracy of production. And when we have simple tasks, they can lead to automatization of the inner language, and they can improve the fluency of production. Finally, task demands can also improve reconceptualizing and rethinking about events. When we have a sequence of tasks, they can consolidate memories for previous efforts at successfully resolving problems arising in communication. And when we have like some scaffolding tasks from simple tasks to complex tasks, and when students are performing those tasks, these complex tasks can prompt learners to attempt more ambitious language, let's say. They can prompt them to use more complex language, and that can improve their communication. So I know all this may sound too much information, but you can later come to this presentation. You can have a copy of this presentation. And after I talk about everything, you can come back to it and you can think about those points again. Because I think after I give you a concrete example of a task-based language teaching, a writing example, I think things will be more clear. So, what should a task-based syllabus look like? According to Michael Long, there are 10 methodological principles for language teaching in a task-based syllabus. What are these? First of all, we need to use tasks, not a text, as the unit of analysis. What does that mean? We should always concentrate on a task because learners can learn the language through the completion of a task. We should promote learning by doing something. So our students should be involved in doing something. We should always elaborate input. We should give students a lot of input, and we should explain the input. We should encourage inductive or chunk learning. We should not explain some grammatical rules explicitly, but we should prompt students to understand certain rules. We should always focus on form, but here form means meaning actually. There's a difference between focus on form and focus on forms. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but Here, what is meant by focus on form is actually the focus is on meaning and communication of meaning while completing a task. It's never on grammatical forms. When it's necessary, we should provide negative feedback. What is negative feedback? Negative feedback is telling students what is not possible in a language. Because we can give students good examples of a language. So they constitute good examples of the language. But students should also be exposed to what is not possible in a language, what is not allowed in a language, and that's negative feedback. We should respect learner syllabi and developmental processes. What does that mean? So as we all know, learners may not be ready to learn really complicated things. For example, if somebody's having difficulty, for example, we cannot teach someone, let's say, reduced relative clauses. So students passing the exam were happy. Students who passed the exam were happy, right? So we are reducing the relative clause. So we cannot teach someone a reduced relative clause before they can understand present progressive tense, like I'm drinking coffee. So we should understand that, and we should scaffold our tasks so that we are respecting learner syllabi. We are teaching students based on how ready they are to learn. And of course, we should promote cooperative and collaborative learning, because we should remember that students are not just learning something from us as their teacher. Students are also learning things from each other, their peers, right? And we should individualize instruction. What this means to me is your students this semester are different from your students last semester, and those students that you had last semester are different from your students 2 years ago. So we should look at our students, and we should think about the needs of our students, and we should always individualize instruction based on the needs of our students. In task-based language teaching, there is also a great emphasis on needs assessment. So as EFL or ESL teachers, we should ask ourselves, what are the needs of my students? What are the actual tasks that my students need to complete in real life using the target language? If it's not possible to give students real, genuine tasks, okay, we can create some pedagogic tasks that we can create based on genuine tasks through the completion of which our students can acquire the language. Then what are those pedagogic tasks that resemble genuine real-life tasks that we can use in our classrooms? We need to think about those. Okay, so now let's talk about writing instruction through the lens of this task-based language teaching. First of all, what is writing? When we define it broadly, writing includes visual, digital, and inscriptional modes of communication. It's essential to all academic and civic endeavors. Writing enables scholarly exchange of ideas. It facilitates civic and professional participation. It inspires creativity and innovation. It transforms students into leaders, activists, artists, teachers, and citizens of the world, right? So what is our role as EFL or ESL teachers in teaching writing? We need to ensure that our students develop sophisticated communicative strategies through understanding their own writing processes, assessing the contexts and audiences for their ideas, and articulating their messages clearly, passionately, and persuasively. We also need to clarify the communicative purpose of the written task and the target audience. We should always use meaningful, realistic, and relevant writing tasks based on the needs of our students. I think that the words meaningful, realistic, and relevant are really, really crucial here, because I've had a lot of instances where teachers just create writing prompts out of the blue, and then students are puzzled. So why are we doing this writing? Like, how is it relevant? How is it meaningful? We should communicate to our students the reasons for writing, the purpose of the text to be written, the audience of the text, the topic, and we should always care about learners' knowledge of the topic, right? So what are some genuine writing tasks that second language learners need to do in a language classroom? They can write an email to a professor. They can apply for a graduate school if the graduate school has English as the medium of instruction, then they have to write letters in English, right? They may write a statement of purpose. They may text or chat with an English-speaking friend through social media. They may take notes while watching a TED Talk to better understand it. What else? What other tasks do L2 learners need to complete through English? Maybe they can write an email to an airline for a refund for a canceled flight. Let's suppose your flight got canceled and you want a refund. What do? You send an email to the airline requesting a refund, right? Maybe you want to describe an Uzbek dish, one of those, to an English-speaking friend so that they can cook it. They're really curious about Uzbek food and you want to describe it, but they don't know Uzbek. So what are you going to do? You have to use English to describe the food, right? Finally, maybe they read something on the newspaper, they read something on social media, and then they have an opinion about it. So they feel really strongly about it, and they want to write an opinion piece, and they want to send it to a journal or a newspaper so that it's published, so that their voice could be heard. I'm going to talk more about this now, and I'm going to show you an activity based on this. So the title of my presentation is Purpose, Context, and Audience in Writing Instruction. But I want you to think about how you learned writing. When you were learning writing, did your writing teachers ever emphasize these things? Did they ever emphasize purpose or context or audience? Or did they just give you writing prompts just out of the blue, like this? So we know that there are some writing prompts, they're extensively used in EFL or ESL classes, but we don't see any reference to purpose, context, or audience, right? What questions do we usually see? What prompts do we usually have? These ones. Do you think that the death penalty should be abolished in the US? Is it better to live in a city or in the countryside? Why? Do you prefer to fly, to take a train, or drive when you travel? Why? Do you agree that computer games lead to violence? What are some advantages and disadvantages of public transportation? Do you think children should be homeschooled? Okay, I remember writing on one of those topics when I was learning writing, but it never occurred to me. I was always asking, why am I writing on this topic? Like, who am I writing for? Why am I writing on this? I don't know anything about this. The teacher didn't provide me with any context or any background on these topics. So it's just out of the blue, you're required to write about something. So this is wrong. We should not do that, right? Then what is purpose? What is context? And I'm just checking my connection. Just a second. Yeah, okay. Looks like I still have connection. Okay, so what is purpose? What is context? And what is audience in writing? And why are they important? Purpose is basically, why are we writing something? What is the purpose for writing? What will be achieved through the act of writing? What is the function of writing except for language practice? Forget about language practice. Why do we need to write this piece of paper? And it should be something other than language practice, right? Because language practice is not authentic enough. Context is, what exactly is the question? What is the topic? And who are the students? When we ask students to write something, are they assuming different personalities for the purposes of the writing? Or are they just being themselves and are they writing from their own perspective? Also, when we say context, do students have sufficient background information about the issues surrounding the topic? So this is context, right? So purpose is why. Why are we writing? What is the reason? Context is who are the students? Are they themselves or are they assuming the personalities of somebody else? And do they have enough information about what is going on about this topic? And the audience, I think this is really significant, and this is usually overlooked in writing instruction. Audience is, who is the audience? Who are the students writing this piece of writing for? Because without knowing who your audience is, when you write something, are you writing it for your parents? Are you writing it for your friends? Are you writing it for, I don't know, who are you writing it for? Because it will change your position, it will change your wording, and it will change your tone of the writing. So we have to know who we are writing for, right? Okay, so now, I think now you have a sense of what task-based language teaching is and what are some key features in task-based language teaching. Now we can have a look at an example of a task-based writing activity. Let's do that. Here's a question for you. Do you think that social media platforms have the right to close or suspend accounts when those accounts explain opinions that may trigger violence, or is that a violation of freedom of speech? So if I just ask you this question, and if I say, okay, now you're writing an essay about this, you're writing an essay as a response to this question, this is a little bit out of the blue. I need to give you the purpose. I need to tell you more about the context, and I need to tell you who your audience is, right? Because this is just a question. So let me give you the purpose and the context and the audience. So, as you know, there was a storming of the United States Capitol a couple days ago. This was exactly a week ago, right? This was a violent attack against the United States Congress on January the 6th. It was carried out by a mob of supporters of the US President Donald Trump in an attempt to overturn his defeat in the 2020 presidential election. During the riot, 5 people were killed, including a police officer. Really sad events, and all the world is talking about this. I'm sure that you have heard about this, or maybe you're following the news, but I'm sure you all have heard about this, right? The 2021 storming of the United States Capitol. Let me give you some more background information. Let me show you some pictures. This is the US Capitol, right? These are some of the protesters. This person was arrested. A number of people here in this picture, they were arrested. And these people were all arrested. Okay. So why are we talking about this? I'm trying to give you some context, right? So following these events, various social media platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Google announced that they're permanently suspending Trump's accounts for inciting violence. Okay. Here is the announcement from Twitter. They said, after close review of recent tweets from the real Donald Trump account and the context around them, specifically how they are being received and interpreted on and off Twitter, we have permanently suspended the account due to the risk of further incitement of violence. Okay, so now you have enough contextual information about the event, right? So going back to the question, what was the question? The question was, do you think that social media platforms had the right to close or suspend accounts when those accounts explain opinions that may trigger violence, or is that a violation of freedom of speech? So this is a task. This is your task. What can we do? There will be a pre-task stage, there will be a task stage, and there will be a post-task stage. So let me tell you what a pre-task stage would look like. In the pre-task stage, we can ask students to read authentic articles on the topic. For example, they can read this article. It says, Donald Trump suspended from Facebook indefinitely, says Mark Zuckerberg. This is from The Guardian. This appeared 6 days ago on January the 7th. They can read yet another article on the topic. Look at this one. It says, Twitter and Facebook locked Trump's accounts after violence on Capitol Hill. So this is from the New York Times. This is also a really recent one. And it says, read 3 authentic and very recent articles on the topic and discuss what you learned with a peer and report your ideas back to the class. So students are not only reading something, an authentic source, they're discussing that with a peer, and then they are reporting what they learn to the class. They can also read this one, for example. This, in the Washington Post, it appeared today actually on the Washington Post. It says, these are the platforms that have banned Trump and his allies. So we can ask students to read some authentic articles on the issue to prepare them for the writing task, right? But not just that, we can ask them to watch things too. For example, we can ask them to watch 3 authentic TED Talks on the topic, and again, discuss with a peer what they learned, and then report to the class. For example, there's a really great talk about free speech by James Kirchick. This was a TED Talk at Yale University. So they can watch this one. And then they can watch yet another one. This one is titled The Freedom of Hate Speech, A Call for Civil Dialogue by Katya Campbell. This was organized at Metropolitan State University of Denver. So again, they can watch this, they can discuss it with a peer, and then they can report their ideas back to the class. Finally, they can watch another thing. This one is titled, Does Freedom of Speech Give Us the Right to Offend? This is a TED Talk organized in Singapore. Again, students can watch this, they can discuss it with a friend, and they can report what they learned to the class. So let's look at the purpose and context and audience, because I didn't tell you the audience yet. You don't know the audience. So what is the purpose? What is the purpose of this writing task? Remember the question, right? So you use social media platforms almost every day, and you feel very strongly about the recent developments regarding the suspension and banning of some social media accounts. As billions of people are using those accounts, you want to voice your opinion and make others hear what you think about freedom of speech. Maybe you think, oh, these social media platforms are right in banning Trump because he was inciting violence. Or maybe you may say, oh, actually, no, they are really wrong because what Trump did is just freedom of speech, so he can do that, and these social media platforms are wrong in banning Trump. Whatever you have to say, we want to listen, right? So what is the context? This is our question, and the question, remember, was, do you think that social media platforms have the right to close or suspend accounts when these accounts explain opinions that may trigger violence, or is that a violation of freedom of speech? And who is our audience? The audience, I haven't told you yet. We always need to specify the audience, always, so that students know who they're writing the essay for, right? Who they're writing for. So we can tell them, we want them to write an opinion essay discussing this question. Your essay will be published in the opinion section of the New York Times. So your audience includes not only the people living in the US, but also millions of other people around the world who follow the New York Times, who get their news from the New York Times. So now students know why they are writing it. Now students have some enough contextual information about the topic because they read 3 authentic articles about it, and they listened to and watched 3 TED Talks about it, and they discussed those with their peers and then with the whole class. And now they have an idea regarding who they're writing this for. They're writing this for so that their essay gets published in the New York Times because they care about this topic and they want their opinions heard. What about the post-task stage? Since your opinion essay will be published in a prestigious newspaper, have 2 friends read it and give you feedback on language and content, including evidence and argumentation and other things, right? Revise your essay in light of the feedback from your peers. So these things, these steps may take days or sometimes a couple weeks, right? They don't need to be completed like in 2 or 3 days. They can be completed over like weeks, because I know this is a lot of work, right? And finally, get more feedback from your teacher and revise your essay again. And finally, what is the completion of the task? What do students need to do? Send your polished essay to the New York Times for publication. Actually send it. After you write it, you send it. It may get accepted. Probably it will be rejected, but you can still send it. And maybe they'll give you some feedback. Maybe they'll say they liked it. Maybe they'll say they didn't like it. Maybe they will not find it relevant. But still, you have a task, and your task is to write an opinion piece to be published in the New York Times. You read a lot about it. You watch a lot of TED Talks about it. You discuss it with your friends. You discuss it with your teacher. And then you complete the task. And throughout this, you improve your writing. You get better at certain forms. When there is a need to discuss some grammar forms, the teacher discusses that. When there is a need to discuss certain vocabulary related to the completion of the task, then the teacher can discuss that. But the crucial thing is that there has to be a need for those discussions to take place. If there is a need to discuss the present perfect tense, okay, then the teacher can discuss the present perfect tense. But this has to be done while the students are working on meaning. They're trying to complete the task. So you may tell me, you may say, hey, Yılmaz, okay, this is good, but you know what? This is way, way too advanced for our students. You may say that. Okay, you're right. So as language teachers, what is your job? Your job is to assess your students. Who are your students? What tasks do they need to complete in the second language or the foreign language? What are the tasks that they need to complete? If you cannot find genuine tasks, what are some pedagogic tasks that you can create that resemble real life, that they can complete so that they really, really focus on meaning while they're completing the task? And that's how they learn the language, they acquire the language. So this is all I want to say. Here are my selected references. And now I can take questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yılmaz. It was really, I think, very stimulating presentation with the theoretical underlying principles. And I think that was a very interesting, practical, urgent, topical task, right? So that I think everyone can just take it and apply it in the classroom today, tomorrow, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much.
I mean, if they have advanced, if you have advanced learners, of course, this is something that you can take and apply. But I don't want to give you, like, I thought about creating 3 activities, actually, like something for like really, truly kind of beginner learners, some for intermediate learners, and some for really advanced learners. This is just for advanced learners. Because of time constraints, of course, I cannot show you like all three, but I think you can just use your creativity and prepare something for like lower level learners, like intermediate level or beginner level learners. Just think about what tasks learners need to complete, and through those tasks, try to teach the language.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Yes, please, Jamila.
Yılmaz, I loved your presentation, and I am very happy that you mentioned CLIL, Content and Language Integrated Learning. Now it is my favorite topic while teaching public education teachers, training and retraining center. I work there. And CLIL is very popular around the world, but it is very new for Uzbekistan. So I am very happy that you only mentioned it in your slide, but I think so my teachers are sitting here, and when I'm telling them that it is very new, it is very innovative, and etc. now, they would believe that Jamila is saying something very true and very popular topic. So how about CLIL in your activities, or Yılmaz, and something like this?
I mean, so I think the success of content and language integrated learning is because students are learning some content. They're learning like mathematics or like history or politics or philosophy. So their mind is on those topics, but not on the language. So they're really focused on meaning, right? That's what true language acquisition should be like. Because when we are acquiring our first languages, we acquire our first languages unconsciously, right? We never think about rules or
natural way.
Yeah. So we don't think about those things. I think the success of content and language integrated learning comes from that the focus is on meaning. The focus is on some content, but not the language itself, because students can figure out structures by themselves, like through some induction, right? They can figure out the rules for like present perfect tense or relative clauses or noun clauses while they're focusing on content. So I think that the success comes from that implicit learning or inductive learning.
Yes. So we mentioned CLIL STEM in the case of while we're dealing with 21st century skills, and you mentioned about authentic materials. So we prepare our students to live outside the school classrooms. Yes. While teaching them writing or teaching them other skills. It is all deals.
It's like a constructive way of teaching, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm going to say is like things should not be out of the blue. Like if you're asking students to do something, there must be a reason. We shouldn't just walk into a classroom and say, okay, today I want you to write about whether you think the death penalty should be abolished in the United States. Students will be like, okay, why are we writing about this? Like, what is the reason for writing about this? You see what I mean? So there has to be a reason that students are doing something.
Yeah, and I agree. So the reason can be with the current needs, or can be something they will do in the future, right? With CLIL, right? Maybe like, or the ESP, for example, right? So that future they're going to be, I don't know, future engineers or what, right? So what they're going to be able to write, right? What they should be able to write in the future. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Ulukbek mentioned here, he left a comment saying that he agreed with you when you said about the high-stake tasks, high-stake exams, I guess, right? They sound usually less authentic and purposeless. Yeah, that's what I was also thinking, like, for example, exams like IELTS, right? So the writing tasks come out of blue.
I mean, yeah.
But can you say about this kind of thing? So it's not teaching, of course, right? It's assessment. What do you think? What's your opinion on that?
I mean, of course, like you have a certain time, of course, and it's an exam. Of course, the question will be out of the blue. I don't know whether they are now providing any kind of context, like maybe they provide you with some context so that you know more about the topic and then you start writing. I'm not so sure if they do that.
Well, there is one sentence, background information.
Yeah, probably. I mean, because it's not teaching.
Right.
Assessment, and there's a time constraint, so that's why it has to be like that, right?
Right. Yeah, but whereas in contrast, there are other tests. I'm not sure about TOEFL, but there are other, for example, in Canada, Kyle and CELPIP. So they are a bit more contextualized, where there is a reading text, the reading task first, and then the writing is also linked to that topic. So I think that would kind of facilitate, it will be easier for learners, right, to contextualize and see the purpose, right?
Yeah. So yeah, the more connections, the better. If you are reading about something and then if you are prompted to write about that, it's just like the integrated writing task in the TOEFL exam.
Right.
So yeah, so there is some context, but again, since this is assessment, it's different. I mean, of course, there has to be a connection between assessment and teaching, right? I'm not an assessment person, so I cannot talk much about it. Of course, there has to be a connection. Of course, we have to assess what we teach. But if you're talking about some standardized tests like TOEFL or IELTS or GRE, then we can't really.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Any other questions? We have a question from Gulnoza: how to motivate learners to write, especially teenagers?
Okay, that's a really good question. So this may sound obvious to people, but just like you learn how to drive a car by driving a car, you learn how to write by writing. So people cannot learn how to write without writing, because I have some students, they're like, okay, we don't want to produce anything, but we want to have perfect writing. That's not going to happen. So students have to write, preferably through some task-based writing activities. They have to write extensively about different topics. They have to make mistakes, and they have to learn from their mistakes, because in task-based language teaching, we are providing students with feedback as well. When the need arises, we can give students some language instruction. We can give them some instruction about vocabulary. We can teach them some vocabulary, but only when there is a need to do so, right? But without students actually writing something, it's impossible for them to learn writing or to improve writing. So how do we motivate them? Please, let's give students something that they can relate to. Because if they cannot relate to it, they cannot write about it. They cannot talk about it, right? Another topic that I thought that I didn't include in this presentation, for example, for intermediate level learners would be something like, okay, in Uzbekistan now, all the schools are shut down and there's online education. Let's say you're a parent and you think that this is affecting you have children and you think that this is affecting your children who are attending primary schools or whatever. Or let's say you're a student and you think that this is affecting you as a student. You want to have in-person classes. You think that your education is being hurt really badly. Then write an opinion essay about this and send it to the Ministry of Education in English. Do it. So this would be something that they could do. And I think we can motivate students about this. But these just need to be some genuine writing tasks that students can do something about. So if I'm just writing something and then throwing it away after my teacher grades it, then I have really wasted my time.
Yes, absolutely, right? Yes. And then if it is a teenager, it might be, imagine you couldn't join the online class, write an email to your teacher to explain why you were absent, right? So saying kind of the, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I do agree. So the personalizing the task, right? So would make people more motivated to write, right? So when they see the kind of the need for that, why they are doing that. Okay, great. Thank
Yılmaz, can I add something?
Yes,
Yılmaz, thank you so much for the wonderful talk and for your time. I really enjoyed it, especially the purpose, context, and the audience stuff in second language writing. It's just Gulnaz, I think, asked a very relevant question, and I really liked your answer. I just want to piggyback on that. I think that's exactly what you wanted to mention, right? Because sort of give students an authentic task so that they're engaged in it, so that they know their purpose. And when it comes to teenagers, right? What are teenagers doing now? They are texting, right? They are on Instagram, right? They're on social media, right? So exactly what you said, right? Like, for example, let's say adding TED Talks, into the task, right? Or giving them an opportunity so that they actively participate in the sort of a global community in response to a prompt, right? For example, we know that TED Talks has a chat capability on its interface, right? Function on the interface, right? So maybe like the teenagers can work in a classroom, right, and finish the first draft of their writing, and the teacher can take a look at it, and maybe the second draft can be posted on the TED Talks website directly, right? Or some sort of a talk on YouTube, right? And or like if you're following, let's say in Uzbekistan, we have this popular singer called Munisa Rizayeva, right? I mean, assuming that the teenagers are following her, right? Maybe they can express their thoughts on an Instagram post, and it might be a little bit of like going somebody's area, but still it might provide them with authentic task. And I think what you mentioned is closely related when it comes to task-based language teaching, and how can we provide students with authentic tasks. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Ulubek. Yeah, you're right. Like now, what are teenagers using? They're using Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, like some other like media platforms, right? So some writing tasks can also be, okay, you want to say something about X, write a tweet about this. You only have 140 characters. So that's a task, right? You're writing something to tweet about that. Like, let's say you are writing something about Tesla, or like, I don't know. So that could also be a task. That could be something for, like, let's say a beginner level learners, because if you're just writing 140 characters, that's going to be like, I don't know, 5 sentences or so. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah, thank you. We have another very interesting question from Marafat saying, how should beginners' writing be checked? Should their writings be corrected from grammar points, from the perspective of grammar?
So that's a really good question. Marifat, yeah, thank you so much. That's a really nice question. We know as writing teachers, when you correct all the things in a student's paper, sometimes they get demoralized. Sometimes they don't like it. They just concentrate on the mistakes. They're like, okay, I have so many mistakes and I don't want to even look at my paper. Let's say it's a paragraph long essay, just one paragraph. And let's say you're correcting 10 things. Rather than correcting 10 things, correct 1 or 2 things that is really kind of affecting or interfering with meaning, that is preventing you from understanding what the student's saying, rather than correcting the same thing again and again, right? Or we can treat a classroom as a whole. We can look at students' mistakes from a holistic perspective, and we can say, okay, these students are usually having problems with, let's say, articles, the and a and an. So you can give holistic feedback to their mistakes. You can say, hey, so I looked at your papers and I see that we still have some problems about articles, and let's talk about them. Rather than giving individual feedback, maybe you can correct one or two things on students' papers, but you can explain to whole class when you see that there is a need among all your students, not just one or two students. So overall, don't correct everything. Students don't always look at all the things. They cannot internalize all of their mistakes, and they cannot correct all of their mistakes right away. Correct things that interfere meaning first. And when you look at all of your papers from all the students, if you can see some pattern, if you can see that your students are failing similar things, they have problems in similar things, then try to correct those rather than like marking a student's papers like with a lot of questions, comments, and like giving them a lot of feedback, because they will be really, not all the students. I would not be demoralized, for example. If I have a lot of feedback from my teacher, I'll be like, okay, I'm so happy. But not everybody is like that. And some students really shut down. We don't want students to shut down.
Yeah, thank you. So there is a question or comment. So Nazima saying, what do you think about our students working with foreign students, exchanging letters or emails, right? And sharing information about their culture and other topics, like pen friends, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. That's also a task, right? Like you're writing something, you're writing an email, you're writing a letter, like an actual letter. I don't know if people are still writing actual letters. I hope people are still writing actual letters. I would like to do that. I'm not doing that, but that's a really amazing way to practice the language. I mean, because what students are doing, they are not doing it for the sake of practicing the language. They are doing it to communicate with someone. And in the meantime, they are acquiring the language. So of course, that's a really good thing. And they should be encouraged to do that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yes, we have some comments. There's one more question from Sadat. What do you think, from what age it will be correct to teach a child to write in a foreign language?
This is so my specialization is second language acquisition. So I'm going to say as early as possible, right? When someone starts learning how to write in a certain language, I'm assuming they mean like when the languages have different orthographies. Even if the languages have different orthographies, let's say Russian and English, right? Two different orthographies. Children can learn those, and up to a certain age, they may really not realize that those are two different systems. They may not realize that. I mean, we know from psycholinguistic research that when children are being raised bilingually, this doesn't apply to writing, maybe it does, I'm not so sure, but when children are being raised bilingually, up to ages like 4 or so, even when they're speaking two languages, they really don't know that they're speaking two languages. For them, it's just like one system. Like they want to communicate, they communicate. Maybe with their moms, they communicate in English. Maybe with their dads, they communicate in French. But to them, it's just one language system. So in terms of writing, of course, it's going to be different. But I would say the earlier, the better. So when somebody is able to write in a language, that person can start instruction in writing in a different language. I think they can go hand in hand, like at the same time, simultaneously.
Yes, I agree. And when we say writing, right, it doesn't mean writing essays, right? So it can be, right? So like, I mean, yeah, some people understand it like that, right? So like it can be different genres, right? Maybe even filling the forms, that's also writing, right? Or writing short notes. This is also the right types of writing, right? That can be as a good starting point. Okay, great. Thank you. We have some comments, but in general, I think we're done with the questions. Thank you so much. We all really enjoyed the presentation and got inspired. I think, yeah, thank you so much. Stay safe and positive.
Thank you so much. Nodira, finally, I'm going to say this. I saw that some people are asking about a copy of the presentation. You can freely share the presentation. I mean, at the end, there are references. I did not integrate the references in the presentation, so I'm telling everybody, but the ideas are taken from all those sources at the end, so just be careful. But you can share the PowerPoint presentation with whoever wants to have a copy. Thank you so much for inviting me. This was a really pleasure. It was great seeing you all, and have a great night.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the slides.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Yılmaz.
thank you.
Nice to meet you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Nodira xon yana bir marta rahmat. Shuncha effortlaringizga Ulug'bek, hamma tashkil qilganinglarga. Charchab kelishimizga qaramasdan maza qildik lekin.
Qatnashganinglar uchun rahmat. Yes, the presentation slides will be in our mentor hub. I'll send them there. Okay, you can take them. Yes, thank you everyone. Yes, have a good night. Rahmat. O'zi Ulug'bekga rahmat tashkillashtirganlarga.
Ulug'bek rahmat.